All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling a huge topic, a system of government that shapes the lives of billions of people all over the world: federalism. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what it is and how it works. So let's get into it. Now, this is pretty wild. Only about 25 countries in the world have federal systems, but get this, they govern a whopping 40% of the entire global population. This map tells a really clear story. If you're a big country, chances are you're a federation. It's a powerful way to manage huge areas and all sorts of different people. So, what is this big idea all about? Well, at its very core, federalism is really an answer to a super important question. How in the world do you share power in a huge, diverse country without everything falling apart? To really get what federalism is, it helps to know what it isn't. So, you've got a unitary system, like in Sri Lanka, where all the power is centralized. The national government basically calls all the shots. But in a federal system, power is split up. Take Belgium, for instance. Since 1993, their central government can't just boss the state governments around because those states have their own powers, and those powers are protected by the Constitution. Okay, so here's the official definition, boiled down. Federalism is just a system that divides power between a central authority, the national government, and all its different parts, like states or provinces. And the crucial part, the thing to remember, is that both levels of government have their own distinct areas of power. So, what are the key ingredients that make a system truly federal? First off, you need at least two levels or tiers of government. Now, both these levels govern you, the same citizen, but they're in charge of different things. That's what jurisdiction means. Like the national government handles the army, but your local government handles the police. And this is a big one. That division of power is written into the Constitution, and one side can't just change it on their own. You also need courts to be the referee when they disagree, and each level needs its own way to make money so they're not dependent on the other. It's all designed to do two things at once: keep the country together, but also let different regions be different. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all federations are built the same way. How a country becomes a federation actually makes a huge difference in how power is shared. There are really two main paths. First, you have coming together federations. Think of the USA or Australia. These were independent states that decided to team up to form a bigger, more secure country. In that model, the states usually keep a ton of power. The second path is holding together. This is where a big, diverse country like India or Spain decides to divide its own power to better manage all the different groups inside it. And in this model, the central government usually ends up being a bit more powerful. So let's zoom in on one of the most fascinating holding together federations out there: India. How do all these ideas work in a country with just an incredible amount of diversity? What's funny is that the Indian Constitution never actually uses the word federation. Instead, it calls India a union of states. But don't let the name fool you. The entire system, the whole structure, is built on those core principles of federalism. India started out with two main levels: the central government and the state governments. Later on, they added a third tier for local governments in villages and cities. And all 7 of those key features we talked about? Yep. They're all there in India's constitution. But it's not a perfectly neat system. Some states actually have special powers because of their unique histories, while other smaller areas, the union territories, have very little power and are run by the central government. So how does this power sharing actually work in practice? Well, the people who wrote India's constitution created a really, really clear blueprint for it. The Constitution basically created 3 lists. First, the Union List. This is for stuff that affects the whole country, like defense and money. Only the central government can make laws about these. Then you have the State List, for things like local police and farming, which are handled by the states. And then there's the Concurrent List, which has things like education and marriage, where both the center and the states can make laws. But, and this is important, if their laws conflict, the central government's law wins. So you might be wondering, what about stuff they couldn't have imagined back then, like computer software? Well, those kinds of things fall under what's called residuary powers, and the union government gets to make the rules for them. Okay, having a plan on paper is one thing, but the real test, the real story, is how federalism actually works in the real world. And for India, it's been a pretty wild ride. The first huge test was literally redrawing the map of the country. After independence, the boundaries of the old states were totally changed to create new ones based on language. This was a massive undertaking, all to make sure that people who spoke the same language could live in the same state. It was a huge step toward making diversity work. So, you've just redrawn the states based on language. What's the next logical but incredibly tricky problem you have to solve? Well, you have to decide on a language policy. And in a country with as many languages as India, that was a very, very sensitive issue. And this chart just shows you exactly how big that challenge was. Look at this. Even Hindi, the most common language, is the mother tongue for less than half the population. Trying to force one language on everyone was just never going to work. So India's leaders were really smart about this. They took a very cautious approach. They didn't make any single language the national language. Hindi was chosen as an official language, but they also recognized 22 other major languages. And crucially, they allowed English to continue to be used for government work. That flexibility was the key to avoiding the kind of terrible conflict that happened in Sri Lanka over language. And that brings us to the final big test, which has really been the ongoing story of how the relationship between the central government and the states has changed over the decades. You see, for a long time after independence, one political party was in charge of almost everything, both at the center and in the states. But after 1990, things started to change big time. Regional political parties became much more powerful. This started an era of coalition governments at the national level, which forced everyone to get used to a new culture of sharing power and respecting what the regions wanted. This image just captures that new reality perfectly, doesn't it? You see the person in charge trying to carefully balance all these different demands from their regional partners. Sure, it makes governing way more complicated, but at the end of the day, it strengthens federalism because more people have a real say. And this cartoon shows just how much things shifted. On one side, you see the states kind of looking up to the central government, almost begging for help, but on the other side, they're meeting as equals. The states were no longer just asking for things. They were demanding real power as true partners in running the country. And really, this quote sums it all up. Through all these tests and changes over the years, the way power is shared in India has actually become much more effective, much more real than it was in the beginning. So this leaves us with a really fascinating and kind of provocative question to chew on. If the rise of regional politics and regional identity has made federalism stronger, does that mean that regionalism is actually good for democracy? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.